page 146, part 11. The human being's body is enlivened by the spirit, which, as a tiny part piece of creation, must be regarded as the actual, truthful life. However, the spirit is only the body enlivening principle which also contains and stores true evolution in itself, which is achieved consciously as well as unconsciously by means of the material consciousness and the overall consciousness block. The spirit is the driving power of the life and of the evolution, and indeed, in constant compliance with the creational laws and recommendations. The power of the striving is conveyed, according to the creational principle, by means of the spirit, to the material consciousness, which independently works and develops itself, indeed, by means of its world of thoughts. The body is the medium of the expression of the material consciousness. Consequently, the body obeys the orders and processes of the material consciousness, regardless of whether these processes are expressed consciously and intentionally, or unintentionally, or quite simply automatically, unconsciously. The consciousness determines its own health in intelligent and rational form by means of the might of its thoughts. But it furthermore also extensively determines the health of the body or its decline, and indeed again by means of the might of the thoughts. What thereby first and foremost comes to the fore is the state of the psyche, which is formed from certain feelings, which in turn are based upon corresponding thoughts. And depending on the state of the psyche, the body can be healthy and powerful, or sick and weak. But that does not mean, and this must be said clearly and precisely, that all diseases and other physical illnesses are only called forth or determined as a result of the thoughts and feelings, and as a result of the psyche, because, truthfully, there are very many physical illnesses and diseases which are determined and come about absolutely in another way, and consequently in regard to their manifestation and effect have nothing to do with the world of thoughts, the world of feelings, and the world of the psyche. However, it must nonetheless be said that the thoughts and feelings, and the psychical state which results from them, can negatively or positively influence physical illnesses and diseases, whereby a healing process, for example, can be dependent upon that, and so forth. At any rate, the fact is that, at the command of unhealthy, wrong, negative, and destructive thoughts, the feelings form in the same way, and then in turn, through these, the psyche, from which the result then is that the body becomes more susceptible to illnesses and disease, and the immune system becomes impaired in its effectiveness. In contrast to that, if the thoughts are constructive, beautiful, positive, happy, and equalized, then the feelings and psyche also form likewise. And as a further consequence, the immune system is thereby strengthened, and the body is as if interwoven with a kind of protective energy. If all the effectiveness of the thoughts is seen in the right way, then it can be recognized that the might of the thoughts is therefore also able to determine the physical well-being, and thereby sickness and health in manifold form, quite apart from the other circumstances of life which are likewise created and steered by the thoughts. The majority of all human matters have their roots solely in the might of the thoughts. That means that sick, bad, negative, and destructive thoughts express themselves in the same kind of unvalues which relate to the feelings and psyche as well as to the body's state of health and to the state of one's morality, character, and personality, in which the state of one's consciousness is also anchored. But all external material circumstances of life are also thereby influenced. If, for example, thoughts of anxiety or fear arise, then they are able to kill just as quickly as a shot from a firearm, if a corresponding action is undertaken. But also under other circumstances, anxiety and fear continually kill thousands of human beings just as certainly as does a deadly material weapon, only just not as quickly. And that is the case when human beings live in a state of anxiety, fear, and terror, which they are not able to overcome and are not able to neutralize. Solely anxiety or fear about something can have the effect that it makes this real. Consequently, a human being who, for example, lives constantly in a state of anxiety about illness, sooner or later actually becomes ill. The might of the thoughts weakens one's physical health and the resistance of one's immune system. Consequently, an illness which is anxiously fought in one's thoughts suddenly appears. Negative, weak, sick, destructive, and wrong thoughts are able to create many kinds of terrible things, and indeed, in every regard, in and on the human being, himself or herself, as well as in his or her external environment, with work, in commerce and politics, in nature, and with interpersonal relationships, and so on and so forth. Anxious thoughts have a demoralizing effect in every regard, and indeed on the feelings and psyche, as well as on one's morale, mood, and disposition, and on one's entire personality. However, one's physical body, as well as the circumstances of life and the environment, are also affected. With time, impure, wrong thoughts of every kind also shake the entire nervous system, and indeed also when the thoughts are not given expression physically. If the thoughts are strong, pure, neutral, positive, equalized, healthy, and happy, as well as of a free and loving form, then vitality and resistance against everything negative and destructive are built up by means of their might. Protected thereby is also the body, which, as a sensitive and plastic instrument, immediately reacts to the kind of the thoughts which the human being tends and nurtures. This is another reason why the human being should not allow a habitual thinking to take the upper hand too much, because in very many regards this leads to extremely negative effects. One's thinking should therefore not be habitual, rather always constructive, and thereby also renewing and progressive, so that the might of the thoughts is able to make real all that which is useful and worth striving for the human being, for his or her consciousness and psyche, as well as for his or her life and entire circumstances of life. As long as the human being nurtures unclean, pessimistic, wrong, sick, bad, and negative thoughts, his or her feelings, which in turn correspondingly form the psyche, from which one's life and body are then influenced, will form in equal manner. If the thoughts from one's consciousness are depraved, then inevitably also one's life and body are depraved, because the might of the thoughts allows no possibility other than that which the thoughts themselves create. In fact, it is the thoughts which are the wellspring of one's actions, one's life, and its fulfillment. If the wellspring is bad and negative, then that is also the case with the actions which emerge from it, with one's life and all factors associated with it. However, If the wellspring is pure, good, and positive, then also one's actions, one's life, and all circumstances connected with it form accordingly. Thoughts cannot be changed by means of a different new diet, or by means of sport, a great amount of talking, and a great amount of book knowledge. Rather, they can be changed solely by means of the thoughts themselves being fathomed and understood in order to then correctly form and use them, that is to say, allow them to be constructively, creatively effective through their own might. Just as the material body demands pure and healthy nourishment, and can only thereby really live and be largely free of suffering and illness, also the thoughts require pure, healthy, and positive nourishment, if they are also to be nurtured in this form. Pure, healthy, and positive thoughts only come about when, in their origin, they are free, open, peaceful, and harmonious, and thereby neutral, positive, equalized. And if the thoughts have been originally formed in this way, then the human being no longer demands ungood, negative factors and desires, through which his or her thoughts are burdened and steered in a negative form. The origin of the thoughts thereby forms from various factors which arise both from ideas and views, as well as from wishes and desires, and so forth, but also from experiences of all kinds of situations of life which call forth certain emotional impulsations, and in this form bring about the effect of their origin on the thoughts which follow. Therefore, it is necessary to control the very origin of the thoughts, in order then, in a controlled manner, to form the thoughts from that, and to steer them in such a form that their might really only makes real all that which is healthy, clean, good, right, and positive. A clear, clean, neutral, positive, equalized thinking leads the enormous might in it to create neutral, positive, equalized habits, from which also new, healthy, positive, valuable ideas, wishes, and determinations constantly arise, which altogether have an evolutive effect. Human beings in whom clean, good, and positive thoughts are inherent, and who have decisively strengthened these thoughts, are practically impervious to influences which harm the psyche, because the might of their healthy, pure, positive thoughts, in fact, does not allow any kind of attack which could not be averted. Therefore, if the human being wants to keep his or her psyche and physical body in top form, and wants to relatively absolutely fulfill himself or herself according to his or her possibilities, then he or she must care for his or her consciousness, because from it arise the ideas and wishes and so forth, from which, in turn, thoughts are created, which then let their might come into play and form everything as is demanded by the kind of the thoughts. Therefore, if the human being wants to change and brighten up his or her psyche, and, in a certain wise, also his or her body, and the appearance of his or her physiognomy, and his or her entire form of expression, then he or she must care for his or her consciousness and have it create, in a neutral, positive, equalized form, those thoughts which in every regard and wise are affirming of life. Thoughts with a negative form, thoughts born of maliciousness, envy, addiction, and vice, of disappointment, lovelessness, and hate, as well as thoughts born of an absence of courage, of selfishness, and unpeace, and all other thoughts of a negative, ungood, unpure, and wrong form, bring the same kind of effects for the psyche and for life in all its variations. Therefore, the joyful or sullen facial expression does not come about by chance, which does not exist anyway. Rather, it comes about solely by means of the might of the joyful or sullen thoughts, which form the feelings and the state of the psyche, which is inevitably reflected in one's facial expression. In this form, also disfiguring wrinkles often come about in faces through which the human being's inner life and life of thoughts become obvious. And naturally, these kinds of wrinkles have nothing to do with those which come about as a result of natural aging processes and so forth. However, the truth is that many such wrinkles emerge through the misuse of thoughts, through foolish thoughts, through manifold kinds of self-created suffering, and through completely wrongly understood and wrongly expressed pride, and so forth. The faces of human beings are formed in this way. Thus, in old age, one can have a face which, in its appearance, is like that of a young and still unspent human being, while others, in their early years, already display a face which shows extraordinarily disharmonious contours and furrows, which are alarming. With the first, it is the product of a bright, happy, and harmonious world of thoughts, and a bright, happy, and harmonious psyche. With the second, the effects of wrong, negative, and self-pitying, unsatisfied thoughts. Just as a human being can have no lovingly furnished, well-ventilated, bright and harmonious living space, and space which is beneficial to him or her, if he or she does not, as is necessary, lovingly arrange it, harmoniously form it, and air it out, and let the sunshine radiate in and warm it. A healthy body and a glad, happy, or bright face are only possible when one's consciousness is filled with thoughts of joy, peace, love, and harmony. These are the thoughts which then, in this form, also form the feelings, by means of which one's goodwill and peaceful and loving cheerfulness then enters the psyche, which then forms in accordance with these thoughts and feelings, and, in turn, radiates the same kind of impulses into the consciousness, from which, in turn, new thoughts of the same kind evolve, in a progressive, constructive rhythm of life-affirming development. When the faces of human beings are regarded, then whole life stories can be recognized by those who see, recognize, and are knowledgeable in this respect. And the older the human being is, the more his or her practical experiences which he or she has lived express themselves in his or her face. But all variations of the impulsations and processing procedures of the feelings, psyche, emotions, and naturally of the thoughts are also written in faces. Consequently, those knowledgeable about physiognomy are able to read them like a book. And exactly this is not possible with the faces of old human beings. And exactly this is not only possible with the faces of old human beings, rather also with those of young human beings. On and in faces, there are not only wrinkles, rather also extraordinarily varied features and quite specific physiognomic characteristics which reveal to the knowledgeable human beings the life and lifestyle of the other human being, along with his or her morality and character, and so forth. On the faces of human beings there are, for example, wrinkles and features which express the human being's feelings for fellow human beings, or however characteristics which express feelings for lower creatures. There are faces which are imprinted with strong and pure thoughts, and others in which negative emotions, negative thoughts, wishes, desires, and feelings, and so forth, are expressed in an extremely alarming wise. And often one who observes these faces does not have to be knowledgeable in reading faces in order to be able to determine the differences and signs and so forth, and in order to gain definite cognitions from them. Based on the signs in faces, every layperson can distinguish between a life which has been lived well or badly, that is to say, negatively or positively. But most human beings barely or only superficially regard the faces of their fellow human beings. Consequently, they do not recognize the life events of the other human being, which are recorded therein. If a human being reaches old age and has lived righteously and in peace, love, joy, freedom, and harmony, then his or her period of old age is also calm, peaceful, harmonious, and equalized, exactly like a magnificent sunset. And dying will also be that way when the period of terrestrial life ends. Such a human being is only old in years, and he or she dies as peacefully and harmoniously as he or she has lived in his or her thoughts and feelings, in his or her lived practical experiences, and in his or her knowledge and wisdom. It is not only for life that healthy, positive, equalized thoughts of love, peace, freedom, and harmony are of enormous importance, because one's entire path of life is determined by them. Rather, such thoughts are also of immense significance for dying. For the moment when the human being lies on his or her deathbed and prepares to cross over into the realm of spiritual light, into the other world, and indeed, as peacefully and harmoniously as he or she has lived in his or her thoughts, feelings, and all other values which are associated with them. There is no better doctor for the human being than his or her healthy, fresh, pure, and neutral positive equalized, peaceful, loving, and free, harmonious thoughts. This applies quite especially to the psyche, which is dependent upon the kind of thoughts which determine its state via the feelings, which are influenced and formed by the thoughts. However, the thoughts also have an influence on purely physical illnesses, because in certain forms they are able to influence a healing as a result of their might. Naturally, the thoughts do not in every respect have absolute control over a physical illness, because often enough just some natural or orthodox medicinal remedy, or even operations, are able to help. However, the thoughts also thereby play a very important role, and indeed in regard to the ill human being's attitude. How he or she mentally reacts in regard to, or rather towards, the illness. It is this attitude which determines one's disposition, that is to say, one's mood, and exactly that represents an important factor for the healing process. Therefore, if the disposition/mood/attitude concerning the illness is negative, bad, and negating, then a healing is thereby negatively influenced and delayed. However, if the attitude/disposition/mood is positive, good, and constructive, then accordingly healing proceeds in a better way and more certainly. Naturally, whether the illness can be treated at all, or is incurable, is always decisive in this. But even with incurable diseases, reality proves time and time again that there are cases in which positive and constructive thoughts and feelings have made healing which appeared impossible possible, because the might of thoughts was victorious for life. If a human being wants to dissolve shades of grief, sorrow, unpeace, or misery or lovelessness, then he or she finds the only right comfort solely in his or her thoughts and in the feelings formed as a result of them. The form of one's thoughts has only to be steered in correct, kind, and wise in order for them to flow along in friendliness, love, and peace. However, To that end, it is necessary that the actual truth is seen, recognized, and understood, because it alone creates peace, freedom, love, and well-being in the human being's thoughts. Therefore, whoever, in knowledge and wisdom, recognizes, while in distress, grief, sorrow, unpeace, lovelessness, unfreedom, and misery, and so forth, the truthly truth, love, effective peace, real inner freedom and harmony, and forms his or her thoughts accordingly, will clearly recognize the victory over himself or herself, and thereby also over his or her thoughts and feelings. However, whoever constantly tends, nurtures, and correspondingly lives thoughts of negation, of bad will, of stirring up trouble, of selfishness, as well as of egoism and egotism, mistrust, envy, cynicism, thoughts born of being a wiseacre, imperiousness, vice, and any other Ausartung, enslaves himself or herself and confines himself or herself to a self-created imprisonment. But any human being who, above all, thinks, tends, and nurtures that which is good, right, positive, peaceful, and joyful, free and harmonious, and who is friendly in the correct measure to each and every one, brings himself or herself the abundance of the peace, the love, and joy, and the harmony itself. Whoever patiently learns the truth in correctness and makes the effort to form knowledge and wisdom in himself or herself, and to find also that which is good and positive in all things of life and in all situations and events, as well as deeds and experiences and so forth, will acquire altruistic features, as a result of which the gates of heaven open to him or her, as the old saying goes. And whoever thinks of peace, love, joy, freedom, and harmony for his or her fellow human beings and all creatures every single day will ultimately bring all these values to himself or herself in great abundance.